Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Profit Power Hour. Man, Peter, those are some good moves. That's really great. Season 4 of the Profit Power Hour brought to you by ProfitCoach. And so glad to have you joining us talking about the PM Trends Report from the esteemed authors on the screen. We're going to get more into the details of the PM Trends Report later on today and how that aligns to the property management operation standards that ProfitCoach released last year, and ultimately answer the question, what separates the best in property management from everybody else? Profit Power Hour Season 4, Episode 3. Thanks, everybody, for joining. And we want to make this an interactive discussion. One of my favorite things about the Profit Power Hour is the great side conversation that happens in chat. So be sure to jump into chat and let's just kick it off. We just wrapped up Q1. What is one thing that you're thankful for so far about 2025? One highlight from Q1. It was a great quarter for us here at ProfitCoach. Really thankful for some record performance. I got to be honest, business has been a slog for me at times. So I'm thankful for the sunshine that pokes through now and again. And we experienced some good blessings here at ProfitCoach. Thankful to God for those. What's your win from Q1? Dump it into chat and make sure that you're not just chatting the panelists, but everybody here. We've got Rick, broker owner, was a great experience. Agreed. One of the best conferences. Peter, churn is going down. What's driving that? Quick 30-second summary.
Renewed focus on our property owner clients. And actually, based on some of the findings from the report that we're going to talk about, is making a difference for us.
Awesome. All right. If you want churn to go down, you showed up to the right place. That's going to be one of the implications of what we're talking about today. I'm really grateful for the efforts of our leadership team, from Dave. Again, team win from Renee. We've got a great team working together. Karen, my family, and Lori, onboarding some new keys. Not exactly sure what that means. Maybe she means units, but congrats. And
yes, that's slang for units these days.
I'm out of the PM slang on that one. All right, Jordan Muela, CEO, co-founder at Lead Simple. Thanks, Jordan, for being with us today, and appreciate your initiative on the data-driven conversations in property management. It's always been a little bit of an emphasis for you. You're the one that pushed us over at ProfitCoach off the cliff back in 2017 to do the financial benchmarking study, and you keep doing it. So appreciate that. Peter Lohman, co-founder and CEO of RL Property Management, and also perhaps even now better known as co-founder of Crane. Crane, you got some stuff going over on at Crane these days. Just give us a quick update, Peter.
Yeah, so Crane is a paid private community for property management business owners. We have an online mastermind component. We have offline events. We did the Crane train up to Pikes Peak there at Broker Owner. Awesome community of folks. And the big news with Crane is we only open up applications twice a year, and they are reopening for new members on Friday morning. So if you've heard about Crane or you're interested, you can go to joincrane.co. You want to learn more and apply.
Thanks, Peter. Dump that URL into chat so everybody can see that. Brad Johnson, CEO and host here at the Profit Power Hour, former CEO at Sawyer Property Management, and me, Chief Strategy Officer here at ProfitCoach, author of the NARPM Accounting Standards, author of the PM Operations Standards. I love me some data as well, so excited to be joining this conversation. And if you haven't heard of ProfitCoach before, I'm not sure how that happens since we're the ones that put on the Profit Power Hour, but we help property managers expand their entrepreneurial freedom by building highly profitable, self-managing companies. And we optimize people. Well, we help create transformation in people, process, and profit using data. So very excited about the topic today. If you've got questions, drop them into the Q&A box so that we can track those throughout the conversation. And hopefully, through the conversation today, we're going to do what we always try to do here, and that is to facilitate a transformation of mindset, helping property managers move from financial and operational fog to crystal clarity on what really matters in property management, how to drive outcomes for owners, not just based on gut feelings, but data-driven outcomes and operations in your business, and ultimately help you move to being a top performer, creating undeniable value for your clients. Are you ready? Peter, you could do another one of those dance moves right now to get the energy going. Thank you. All right, let's dive in. And I want to launch with a little bit of a poll here just to get the conversation going. And that is, what do you think will have the biggest impact on property management in the next 5 years? Jump into the poll and give us some of your thoughts as we kick off this session. What do you think will have the biggest impact on property management in the next 5 years? Economic conditions, government regulations, tenant expectations and demands, technology, and automation. And John, you said AI. That would go in technology and automation. All right. And guys, as we let the poll results come in, a lot of the folks on here know about the PM operations standards that came out in October of last year and was really designed to give a framework to the industry for having data-driven conversations around operational performance. What's actually going on inside of our PM businesses? What are the outcomes that we're achieving and delivering? A lot of times those conversations have gotten bogged down because everybody says, well, we can't really compare results because we do things in 17 different ways across the industry. The PM Operations Standards was an attempt to standardize the key operations and milestones and processes in property management, and then create a set of metrics so that we can have a common language of comparison around performance. What that really did was give us a way of talking about what we're doing in our business. What it didn't do was give us much to talk about in terms of what do owners really want. And sometimes it's easy for us as business owners to live inside our own little world of what we think is important and what we think we do really well. But we really do need increased clarity in this industry on what owners and investors really want. The PM Trends report from Lead Simple and Peter Lohman's newsletter, I guess that was the other contributing sponsor, was all about answering that second question. Guys, just high level, what motivated you and how do you feel about the results? What conversation has come about as a result of releasing this back in December?
Well, this was really motivated by the original 2017 iceberg report, which kind of took the industry by storm at the time and revealed that most rental properties in America are self-managed by the property owner directly. And when I say most, I mean 70%, 70 at the time. And I kept wondering if they were ever going to release an update to that. I was curious what direction that number was trending, if it was moving at all. And that was really the impetus, was my own curiosity. I ended up contacting the group that organized and researched and put together that iceberg report, which was Harris Poll. And Harris Poll said, no updates forthcoming. We don't have anything for you. And I ended up calling them back and saying, listen, how much would it cost to actually like sort of do a new property management report, interviewing both people who are self-managing and those who are working with a professional manager, to find out not only has that number shifted at all, but a bunch of other questions I was curious about too. And that snowballed into a collaboration with Jordan, and we pulled the trigger speculatively on this very expensive, large research project with Harris Poll, backfilled it with sponsors. Very thankful for all the sponsors who came in and made that possible. And we ended up with this awesome report. And it's been kind of taking the industry by storm. It's changed how I do business. It's really impacted a lot of the conversations that have been happening around the industry. And I'm excited to get in and talk about not only the report today, but some new findings that we've never discussed before, which we were able to tease out of the data. So that's how I think about it.
Charts, yeah. Folks, all 147 of you who are live right now are not going to be disappointed. Okay. Jordan, how about for you? What are some of the conversations that you've started having, or maybe some of the conversational shifts that you've experienced since releasing this data?
The biggest motivation for me was simply the fact that self-managing landlords is a segment that I don't understand, and it's very opaque. When I tell somebody I'm involved in property management, frequently people try to relate in all kinds of ways that reminds me, like, actually, single family, third party, detached dwelling property management, plenty of aspects of property management that I'm not connected to. And really rentals more broadly and landlording isn't a world that I'm overly conversant with. There's just a lot of mystery of what do self-managing landlords think? What do they want? Why do they choose not to work with third-party property managers? So that was really intensely interesting to me as an opportunity to peer into. And the biggest shift for me, derivative of having done the research, is understanding the value of knowing what is in your customers and prospects' mind when you're not speaking to what their expectations should be. In the absence of information, people are still generating expectations. And this was just a huge reminder for me. Maybe you don't like the expectations, maybe you think they're reasonable, but it's really useful to know what they are.
Yeah. Brad, I'm curious. I mean, we're going to talk a lot about expectations in the next, 50 minutes, owners' expectations in particular. And there's a couple of different things you can do with that. You can say, hey, like, this is the gospel. This is what we must do. But just, from your perspective, having run a 1,300 unit company, like, how do you think, as we go through this data, like, what's the lens to be looking at this through as you relate it back to the operations of your property management business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I think that it's important to get the information. I would say for me personally, what owners want, what they say they want is a data point. It's not the data point. I know that this quote is not actually real, but it illustrates my point well, so I'll use it anyways, which is the Henry Ford quote about a horse. He said, if I asked people what they want, they would have said a faster horse. So I'm in no way discounting finding out what owners want. I'm also saying that probably some of what we should do is help reset and shift their expectations and be able to create systems that get them what they really want without necessarily saying that we're going to do it in the means in which they have specified that they specifically want right now. So I think knowledge is power. I think it's really useful. I think there's a lot we can do with this. But I think personally, I feel like there's a good bit of nuance to what we should do the therefore on the other side of the data.
A risk of sounding overly philosophical here. The Jordan, this is a concept you brought up frequently in my interactions with you, but making the distinction between interest and position is really valuable here. In other words, there's the actual interest, the bottom line, not bottom line in terms of financial, but the root motivation and desire of the owner. And then there's the position that they take around that. In other words, the way that they think they need to operate in order to get that end outcome. They could be right about that. They may be wrong about that. We're going to try and tease that out as best as we can today. All right, let me throw up the poll results. If you guys are, nope, you're not seeing those. Now you are. All right. You guys are of the opinion that the most impactful thing over the next 5 years is going to be technology and automation. I'm guessing about more than half of you are thinking that's AI. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And how does AI show up in the PM Trends report? That's kind of an interesting conversation. We'll tease that one out here. And then second biggest position here is that economic conditions are going to have the biggest impact on the industry. All right, let's dive in and just a high-level overview of the agenda, what owners really want, how to position your business to attract and retain them, how top property managers are proving value or demonstrating value to investors and increasing retention, operational inefficiencies that are costing PMs time and money and how to fix them, and then a little bit at the end again on key trends shaping the industry, how to stay ahead of the curve. All right, let's talk about what owners really want. And we're going to just, again, throw up one more poll here because we have some data. But if you haven't seen the data, we're really curious as the hosts of this webinar to see what you think owners believe is, what you believe that owners think is the most important factor or consideration for them when hiring a PM. So I'm going to launch this poll. What factors matter most when hiring a property manager? This is, in your opinion, level of experience, reputation, and trustworthiness, pricing and fees, local market expertise. Or if you want to put in an other option, you can write it in chat. Okay, so hit other and then tell us what you think that other is. Level of experience, reputation, and trustworthiness, pricing, pricing and fees, local market expertise. Guys, let's jump into the data. And these are just some high-level charts. We're going to go to some of the charts from the PM Trends report about owner priorities. But Peter, walk us through this new data that you got within the last couple of weeks.
Yep. So this is some of the new research I was mentioning. This is not in the OG PM Trends report. If you've seen that, this is fresh analysis from a researcher that we hired to even go deeper into the data that we got, the raw data from Harris Poll. This chart is fascinating. It shows by generation, so by age, silent generation, boomers, Gen X, etc. Are they using or have they used a property manager, or would they never consider using a property manager? And you can see just a super consistent shift. The younger they are, the more likely they are to currently use or consider using a property manager. And that was something that I intuitively believed from running a property management business and interacting with our clients. But seeing the data bear it out was fascinating. And I think there's a societal shift in the background here where older people were more likely to do things like fix their own home repairs, work on their own cars. And going along with that is kind of, I can collect the rent. I can deal with the tenants. I can fix the toilet. I can deal with that. And younger people are like, I'm just going to hire somebody to take care of that. I either don't know how to do it or don't want to do it. And that's good news for professional property managers. We have a sort of generational tailwinds here, but seeing it in the data was really, really cool.
Peter, question from Steve Simpson on this. Any data on which of these groups actually own rental properties? My understanding is that everybody owns a rental property.
Correct.
Yeah. All respondents own rental properties. That's correct.
Note that Peter's saying that this kind of lines up with his intuition, makes sense. He's on the front lines. This I did not expect because this did not align with the CSAT ratings. The CSAT ratings broken down by generation show somewhat of the inverse. They show that the older generations rate higher and are more pleased with property managers, and the younger generations give a lower NPS rating. So this was counterintuitive to me based on the first cut of the data, and there's a little bit of a disconnect and schizophrenia there.
Yeah. So the younger generations want to do less, but they're more demanding. I don't know what that means, but maybe something along those lines. It seems like my generation, millennial generation, we always come out shining in these data studies. All right. This one is interesting. I wouldn't have even thought to ask these questions about the impact of children on likelihood to want a professional property manager, but you did, Peter. Why?
Well, this actually was just kind of a byproduct of the demographic data that Harris Poll collects as sort of their intake process for the survey, for all their surveying. But yes, on the top graph there, you can see if and when you have a child, your likelihood of using a professional property manager just about doubles. So, as an industry, basically we need to promote children. Like, we love kids. We want more people to have kids. We want people getting married young and having a lot of kids. So I don't know what that means in terms of what we should be sponsoring and what legislation that that NARPM should be involved in Capitol Hill, but this is obvious. I mean, it doesn't get much more clear than this. So,
well, I have a core belief, Peter, that children are indeed a blessing from God. So I'm on board with you. Let's keep doing it.
Let's do it.
Good for the industry too. Well, I guess one practical outcome of this is if you're segmenting cold leads, look for people who have at least one kid. Okay, moving right on. Let's talk a little bit about some of the data. This is specifically about factors that matter most when considering hiring a property manager. We're going to talk a little bit about what property managers are evaluated on by owners who are actually using a property manager right now. This is the question that's just asked to all landlords, regardless of whether or not they're currently using a property manager, and more what their buying criteria are. Peter, Jordan, thoughts, some of your kind of high level observations on these two charts.
There's some vindication here for property managers. Yelp rating, third from the last.
Okay.
Boy, does that warm the hearts of some property managers. Google ratings higher than that. BBB rating is like meaningfully a number of places higher than Yelp. Enjoy, folks. That was a surprise. At the second to last, their website. How can that be? How can it be that ratings in your website is the lowest? Doesn't quite make sense to me, but it's
well, Yelp ratings, to be specific.
Yes, Yelp ratings, but ratings overall lower. And last place, a national brand, which is also really interesting. In a lot of these charts, what ranks last to me was more interesting than what ranks at the top.
Okay, don't you think there's a little bit of dissonance here, though, Jordan, between reputation being number 2 and ratings being lower? I mean, like, or maybe the question is, how are they evaluating reputation outside of ratings?
It's trust in ratings. The online ratings are a proxy for reputation, and you can see there's some kind of a disconnect between the degree to which people believe it is a complete, fully accurate representation. What Peter just said, lack of trust in online reviews. And let's be real, folks. Like, let's do a little self-reflection here. Has anybody ever had a program or an initiative to augment online ratings? You know, I don't think it's entirely unreasonable that people have some level of question.
Well, okay, so this actually connects really well to a hobby horse of mine over the last few months, which, since releasing the property management operation standards, we've been asking the question, how do you know you're doing a good job? And the number one response to that question always is, you guessed it, online reviews. Which, incidentally, I've always felt is kind of a bogus way to know if your operations are actually quality, because we know how those can be optimized. I'm not saying it's not relevant at all, but it's just not fundamental. And this data actually kind of supports some corollary skepticism from owners on that point. All right, just leave that one there. Let's move on. This one I felt is actually a little bit more actionable. Guys, talk about your observations and thoughts here in terms of property managers being most commonly evaluated on the items on the screen. Not everybody at once.
Yeah, so this screen is looking at people who are working with a property manager. How are they evaluating the performance of that property management company? So this is like an operations question versus the prior slide, which was more tied up with like sales and marketing. You know, the answers here, Jordan pointed out during our keynote presentation, are actually, many of them are tied up with NOI, net operating income. In other words, the actual performance of the physical assets that we're managing. So I was reassured by this data that the work we do as property managers does matter to our clients, and it's not just about communication. It's not just about our online reviews. So that's what jumped out for me here.
All right, Peter. Adam Willis did not like my comment about online reviews. Adam, you asked for the mic. I just gave you the mic. Adam,
You will need to unmute if you wish to speak.
Here you go. Yeah, you're unmuted. Go for it.
No, I'm a big fan. As Todd pointed out, Google reviews are very prevalent. So, and AI is now looking and combing the internet, and part of the evaluation on choosing a property management company is I go to ChatGPT, who's the best property management company? It's crawling all of the review sites. So if you're looking to drum up business, you have to play the game of Google reviews, etc.
100% agree.
Yeah. And my BDM can chalk up her close rate being, 25 plus, sometimes into the 30s, saying, yeah, people will call and they'll say, hey, I noticed your reviews. Where do I sign? That's anecdotal, but it's a lot easier to close business because of your online reputation.
Online reputation, absolutely important. My point is it may not be the best way to actually analyze your operations. That's all I'm trying to say there. But what I do love about this chart is it gives us some really specific jumping off points around the actual functional aspects of property management that are important to owners. I did have one question here, guys. Peter, maybe I'll throw this one at you. PM professionalism. What are people supposed to do with that?
Yeah, so that word professionalism is doing a lot of heavy lifting on this chart. And I think we're going to learn more about what owners believe professional property managers do through the rest of today. And if you read through the report as well. It's a great question, and I would love to tease this apart in a follow-up survey. What does being a professional property manager mean to our customers, to our clients? I'm not going to speak for them. I've got some ideas, but I would actually be curious on other people's thoughts here too.
Jordan, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, from the ProfitCoach guys, Brad, Danny, I just gotta reflect back and get y'all's take. Again, look at what's at the bottom. Fees, second to last. How can it be? How can fees and dead last? Frequency of accounting errors.
Probably should be first.
As a prior partner with you guys in an accounting firm, I can't say it's entirely counterintuitive based on firsthand experience, but it's a little unsatisfying. The fact that like accounting errors, correction, getting the money right, last place. Like, how do y'all react to this?
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of go back to my point from earlier, which is just because people say that it's what there's an education situation here going on, or maybe a lack of education, understanding that, like one of the primary things you actually ought to evaluate your PM company on is, have they been, if they've been audited, how did it go? Do they have a history of fraud, of commingling of funds, of messing with your money in an improper way? So I think that there's, not that it's a great sales pitch to an owner. It's like, hey, we don't make accounting mistakes. You probably, I think that's assumed. And so maybe that's why they're not commonly evaluated on that, is because, well, assume that you have a core competency in accounting. But I've talked to property managers, or I've used property managers who took 7 days to get back to me. They didn't answer their phone. It took 3 weeks to fix, a broken toilet, things like that.
I agree with Brad. I think it's an awareness issue.
Yeah.
What's also really interesting on this is the difference between pricing being up at the top of the list on buying criteria, but once they're actually in service, it's almost at the bottom of the list. In other words, this is data that validates the common experience of a lot of property managers, and that is the generally low churn results when property managers do significant price increases on current owners.
100%. Uneducated buyers of property management services allocate disproportionate weight to fees. Jordan's talked a lot about how, in the lack of a knowledge of how to evaluate a product or service, you lean on what you know, and costs. You know what it costs. You can cross compare that easily. You can't cross compare their professionalism or how likely they are to make a mistake. Once you're working with a property manager, you realize, oh shoot, their actual monthly fee is basically irrelevant to the overall performance of the asset and my overall experience in working with a professional property manager. Whether they're $79 a month or $100 a month, or whether they're 9 or 10% of the monthly rent, it's basically a rounding error on their ability to complete a work order efficiently, or to find great tenants and keep them in the property, or to ensure we're compliant with fair housing laws, like all of these other things that are many orders of magnitude more impactful than the monthly cost, plus or minus, $30 a month.
Yeah, and Ryan raises a great point, which is these from here, tenant satisfaction all the way down to fees, those are all within 12 points of each other. So not as if these things down here don't matter at all to owners. But just practically speaking, I know we're getting way off topic here, but it's turning into a very interesting conversation. What is the practical ramification of this in terms of getting new buyers and marketing to prospects. How do you cross the chasm of let me go back. Pricing is really important pricing is not very important.
It's really easy. You just tell the prospects, you're wrong to focus on pricing. Let me tell you how you should be.
You're an idiot. Trust
Yeah.
me. Always worked in sales.
Yeah.
It's transparency. It's everything else that we're going to talk about later. It's just framing the issue of what the cost is actually going to be and the basis upon which you should evaluate cost. We're not doing that collectively as an industry. We're not
education.
Education. Yes, correct. Particularly for the folks that are highly disposed not to work with a property manager, that have never, that will never, they are obsessed with price. And their perception of price is that it's going to cost more than it is. The data elsewhere shows us they have a very clear conception that property managers charge more than they do. And some of that, the framing and the contrast we're able to do is a result of other ProfitCoach data. So it's just speaking to what's not currently being framed.
My sales mentor says this: in the absence of any other reason to buy, people will always default to price. So our job is to give them the other reasons to buy. That's what we're going to segue now to for the rest of this discussion. Let's talk about communication and some of the data around communication. A couple of key charts here. Preferred communication channels for non-emergencies with property managers. Peter, I know you're really hot on these charts. Take it away.
Yeah. So we asked property owners specifically for non-emergencies, how would you prefer that your property manager communicate with you? And here are the results. You may have heard me talk about this before. We're going to look at some data that sort of breaks this apart by generation. So think in your mind, how might this data look if we separated it by generation? And we'll see if the results match your expectations. My thing I've been saying recently is you can summarize this whole 40-some page report into 2 words, which is phone now. Your property owners want to talk to you by phone, and they want to talk to you now, not tomorrow, not later today. Here's the
data
slide.
on that.
Yep, supports that right here. And so this, for me, I'll talk more about it, but it's a shift. I was completely going the other direction, frankly, in how we interacted with our property owner clients. I was trying to get away from the phone. I was trying to not be like the instantaneous response company because I felt like, hey, we're busy actually, managing the properties that you hired us to manage. Can you wait till tomorrow morning or later today to get a response? And frankly, I think that's what was making our churn look really bad the last couple of years. And now that we have a clear understanding of what our property owners want, and we've made course corrections and adjustments, we're seeing our churn come back down. So it's a kind of a nice story. I don't know how super, this data is all really messy and I'm only one company, so can't draw broad conclusions, but this is what they say they want.
And look at this. 73% are looking for that response to happen within an hour, or a few hours. So that's fast.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've got some data on what property managers are actually targeting that in just a second. Okay. Break this chart now. This one blew me away because, all right, I would have thought that the people that really wanted the phone call, it was the baby boomers that were really driving this poll right here. Explain this chart to us, Peter.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, picture in your mind how this would break down by generation. Turns out essentially all generations would prefer a phone call over all other methods of communication. Weirdly, the baby boomer is actually slightly toward the email there, but you can see here, even Gen Z.
Love them some email.
Yeah. Even Gen Z, who you'd think doesn't even know how to use a phone, just doesn't even have a phone at all. They turn off the cellular, phone call ability on their phones. They just have no interest in talking on the phone. They're like, yeah, give me a call if there's an issue with my property. So,
yeah, it's really amazing.
The context of what's being discussed is the entirety of what's driving this, in my opinion. The vast majority of I'm never calling people. I'm never calling vendors. I'm not trying to get on the phone. God forbid. I have people call, run a software company, people call us from time to time. And I just think to myself, when is the last time I ever called a software company? It wouldn't even occur to me that that was like an option. So what's happening here? What I think is happening is it involves money. What is the context of the phone call? Money flowing out of my pocket. That is the basis upon which we're having this interaction. And in that context, I'd really like to get on the phone and have you explain that to me in detail. The context is what frames the preference for the medium.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Now the big question is, how does this actually correlate to what property managers are targeting themselves? So go back to, get there in just a second. Go back to this slide. Expected response times, again, a few hours, but the same day, 1 hour or sooner. Here's what property managers are actually targeting. This is based off of the property management operations standards. So median first reply time target for property managers is 2.5 hours. Top 25% are targeting 1 hour. Average response time, median 4 hours, top 25%, 1 hour. So I would say these are actually fairly aligned here, but there's quite a few people below the median that are closer to the 24-hour mark in our results. So I would just say to all the 24-hour responders out there, there's a pretty big discrepancy between what the average investor wants and that target. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the, we're going to kind of tie all this together in terms of like priorities. But so I think that the meta question here, Peter, is you've switched significantly. You're also purporting this idea that owners do not want to talk to a property management company. They want to talk to a property manager, singular human being with whom they have a relationship. This is a major shift from some of the common, place wisdom around how to drive efficiency in your business with 27 levels of a phone tree so that you never actually have to talk to anybody. How are you doing that, and how are you making it work efficiently? Yeah, I'm interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, I will say we're in process here. I'm learning as we go. You're right. So prior to the last few months, we were going down like a SaaS direction. We were, email primary mode. We have kind of a ticketing mentality, bounce around the ticket to whoever's best qualified to handle it. And now I'm taking much more of a personal connection relationship approach. We're considering moving to like a pod hybrid where every owner would have a single point of contact. In terms of how to make this work efficiently, well, there's things you can do to prevent phone calls from happening in the first place by setting expectations, having great online portals, and generally answering questions before they become a question. Wolf has a great line of thinking here. But, given the data that we're seeing here, I think what the honest answer for me is I'm going to look to optimize and make efficient other parts of my business, of which there are a lot, so that our property managers and our team can be available to take phone calls with owners and make phone calls to owners. There's a million other things we have to do in property management besides talk to owners. And if we can optimize and make those areas more efficient, we will have more time for this. I forget who I first heard this from, but there's a great line about automate the ordinary so you can personalize the extraordinary. I think that this falls under that heading for me.
Which is an interesting tie-in to the whole asset management conversation, right? So it's a part of this is, what do you want to be talking about? And if part of what we're dealing with here is a trust gap, and that's going to show up later on in the data in terms of the amount of control that property owners want in the process. And in terms of closing the trust gap, sure, a phone call is probably going to go a long way towards that. But how much, we could talk about the expense of that phone call. I think the more interesting conversation is how much value can you create with that phone call? in the owner relationship. And I think the extent to which that conversation moves from tactical, hey, we got that plumbing issue fixed, to strategic, here's how we are creating bottom line impact for you and how can we do that better, then you start paying for those phone calls in a new way. So let's look at I think one opportunity here is to look at the question from a how do we expand the value pie through the phone instead of just looking at it from a cost perspective. Brad, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just threw this in chat. It's not necessarily where you were headed, but I think it's really interesting. Peter, you did a survey. Did you do this on your newsletter or on LinkedIn about what how do you structure your company if you have more than 500 units?
Yeah, that was in the newsletter. Yep.
Okay. And the result was overwhelmingly departmental. Isn't that also
Correct.
correct?
Yep.
That really surprised me. Not because I don't think departmental is a great method, but because the biggest, in my understanding, the biggest weakness of a departmental methodology is that you often don't have a single point of contact for an owner. So phone now is great, and maybe there's a world in which the owner doesn't care who calls as long as someone calls, and that maybe is the biggest counter to my point. But the reason I ran a hybrid model with a single point of owner contact for every single owner was that exact reason. There's one person who knows everything there is to know about this property and this owner. They are the person who's supposed to pick up the phone and make the phone call. You know, how do you relate to that, those two data points, your survey and the landlord study?
Well, I mean, we're departmental right now, and I've been a big proponent of departmental. It's worked well to get us to where we are today. As I was talking about switching to pod, Todd, who's in the chat, was saying, "Hey, get back to me in a year. Let me know how that goes," because sort of implying that he doesn't think it's a good idea. I took a note to do that, by the way, Todd. So we will be checking back in. So we'll see. And yeah, I don't love the concept of pod from like the sort of engineer efficiency part of my brain, because I've got like
Right.
this Adam Smith division of labor thing going on that I always want to optimize for. And the other issue with sort of the single point of contact is that you need absolute superstars in that sort of leader of the pod role who has that single point of contact. This person needs to be able to read financial statements. They need to understand how home systems work and be able to speak about maintenance. They need to have great customer service skills with the property owner. They need to be able to deal with tenants. They need to be able to deal with vendors, because they're going to be able to, they need to answer all of those questions and in depth when they're talking to an owner. So those people are super hard to find. It's much easier if you have everything divided by function and you find someone who's really good at leasing and someone who's really good at, you know, dealing with owners and someone who's really good at maintenance coordination. But if this is what the owners want and it reduces our churn, it's worth paying for. It's worth paying up for and taking the time to find those superstars. So I'm learning. I mean, you guys know I write about what I'm doing. I share it. I'm trying stuff. We're all kind of trying to figure this out together, I think.
This is where I wish Ben Sensenbaugh was in the conversation, because Ben is the engineer type, extremely successful entrepreneur, heavily using technology on the communication side of things. You know, has you know, an AI powered call center. Um, and he's going the opposite direction on this, which is his point of view is owners don't want a single point of contact. They want an answer now.
Mhm.
And his perspective is that if I can segment and get the answer, segment the expertise and get the people who can answer the question on the phone right away with the right information, then I've solved the problem much more efficiently. Now, the question is whether or not you can do that, but certainly I have to believe that AI is a big part of helping people who are answering the phone get the information very quickly to be able to serve it up very quickly. I'm probably a little bit more in the answer now category, and certainly on the phone that's fine. But in terms of it having to be a single point of contact, I think this is a little bit of a question of interest versus position. I think one could make the argument that what owners really want is an answer And they really don't care if it's from a single point of contact. They just believe that's the way that they would normally get it. That's a theory.
I love that you invoked interest versus position. That's exactly what's happening here. The phone call is a proxy for resolution. What they want is resolution by any means necessary, by carrier pigeon, if that's effective. And the person most qualified to provide resolution is the last person in the organization that you want interrupted by phone calls all day. That's the irony. The person most qualified, you don't want interrupted by phone calls.
Yeah.
Danny, you mentioned like labor and what's the resistance with phone calls. Is it cost? Maybe, like, that does come up with answering services. You know, people thinking about running the meter, but I don't think it's really cost. It's interruption. I just dealt with this internally. I was looking at the number of calls that we're answering, and I talked to my head of support, and his response was, well, the team doesn't like it because it's interruptive. And it was like, well, yeah, obviously, like, I get that they don't like it, and who cares? Completely irrelevant to the outcome for the customer. So I think part of the answer here is segmenting the calls, answering what you can answer easily as quickly as possible, and then taking the hairy, more difficult stuff and elevating it to the right resource. But segmenting the level of complexity is the opportunity that exists with AI. There's lower level stuff that can get clipped off via AI, and the hairy stuff that involves coordinating between 5 municipalities, that's always going to require getting an extremely expensive, limited resource on the phone.
I'll add one more comment here, and it aligns very well with what Steve just said. I like intellectually am aligned with Todd and some of what you just said, Jordan. My lived experience is that these property owners, they, even if you get them the answer within the hour, the experience of you having to like transfer them to somebody else and have someone else call them back and, oh, I'm going to find out for you. Okay, here's the answer. I found out. There's something about that experience for the owner that is not satisfactory. The owner feels like, okay, I got my answers, but who's really looking out for my property here? I feel like my property is just a cog in a machine and that it could come off the rails at any moment and no one would even notice or care unless I called in. They want to have this feeling in their heart that somebody, not some company, but somebody is looking out for them and their property and has their cell phone number and is looking at things on some kind of a dashboard every day across departments and is like accountable to the owner for what's happening.
This is where pricing tiers comes in. And people use this in SaaS. Why not use it in property management? Pay to get that level of value. And the beautiful thing about assigning a price tag to it, as opposed to doing it for everybody, is that you are calling out the value by assigning a price tag to it. So that's one idea on how to handle the discrepancy of approaches, because it does cost more money. But I think you can make a great argument like Peter did. It creates more value. Let's talk about maintenance. Peter, break this chart down for us.
So this is great. This chart really has a theme, and it's circled in blue at the top, which is, hey, maintenance. This is the number one pain point. This is the biggest challenge. This is something that property management companies are highly valued for solving. So that's kind of great to hear because it is a huge part of our operation as property management business owners and operators, is dealing with maintenance. And I also think it's an opportunity for us to highlight for owners all the work that we're doing. I had a great conversation at Broker Owner last week. I can't remember who it was with, but they said something really cool, which it might have been Blakely Hughes. I think he said something like, we tell owners every single time that a call comes in and we're able to head it off without sending out a vendor. Like if a tenant calls in and we're able to troubleshoot it over the phone and get them to resolve it, we notify owners immediately. And that's a great way to like show value to owners and make them sort of build that goodwill bank that you may need to draw on when there's an actual cost. So this is great. And there's a lot of really cool technology in the space from vendors that's making dealing with all of this much, much easier and more straightforward and transparent. So this was cool to see for me.
All right. A couple other things on this. One of the interesting data points in the trends report is the expectation prevailing expectation around the speed at which repairs are handled. And if you go back to the chart on what owners want, tenant satisfaction was number 2. Speed of repair was, I think, 4 or 5. But the point I'm trying to make there is that tenant satisfaction obviously correlates highly to this number here. And so, just interesting to note that 32% of owners want a 3-day speed to repair, whereas the industry right now is at about 6. And the data in our property management operations standards in terms of what PMs are targeting aligns to that. The median target for speed to repair is 6 days, and the top 25% are targeting 3 days. The slowest 25% are targeting 12 days. That's quite a discrepancy. There's 25% of the industry that's targeting a speed to repair of 12 days. Owners expect 3 days, according to this data. Let's talk a little bit about control. This is something that came up in terms of barriers to hiring a property manager. And this, there's this control versus efficiency tension that surfaces here. 43% say that their desire to control the management of the property is holding them back from actually hiring a PM. And then if you look at this chart right here, you can see that there's a lot of people, about 65% of owners who currently work with a property manager. 39% of them strongly prefer to be involved. 28% somewhat prefer to be involved. Brad, what are your thoughts here on kind of navigating this control, desire for control with the need for efficiency to keep costs down and meet the other buying criteria of the owner?
Yes, thank you. If you've ever spoken to me about this, you know that this is a bit of a red meat steak for me, because my fundamental philosophy on this, and this is not for everybody. I recognize that you have choices when you own and run a PM company, and you can work with owners how you want to work with owners. I wanted to work with owners and operationally kind of mandated to work with owners who did not have full control or really anything close to control over what happened with their properties. In the same way that I do not call my dentist or give him an opinion on what he should do with my teeth, or an eye surgeon on how he should handle the scalpel with my eye, I did not want non-real estate, non-property management experts to tell me how to do my job. And so I recognize that they want full control and they want some control, but what's interesting is there is actually a cognitive dissonance between what owners say they want and their behavior, which prevents them from getting what they want. So if you're in the sort of model that I was in, so they want 3 days or less on speed to repair, and we're delivering on a benchmark level somewhere around 6 days. In my experience, the primary bottleneck in speed to repair is not the vendor, it's not the PM company, it's usually the owner. The owner wants to pick the vendor. The owner wants to approve the price. The owner wants no maintenance reserves so that they can, so that they have to authorize the funds. Sometimes they have to send the funds. So my approach was, and someone mentioned this in the chat, my approach was at the PMA signing process, you set the expectation of, I'm the professional, you need to trust me. If you can't trust me, or if you want to co-manage this property with me, either this isn't going to work, or what some people do, which is, yeah, my brother-in-law could do it for half of that. Or what some people do is, and I don't know if this is a joke or if people are really doing this, I never did it, but yeah, we can co-manage the property, but you're going to pay 3 times more, or you're going to pay twice as more, because you're just going to get in my way and it's going to make things worse. So if you want fast speed, you need to have less control. You can have control or you can have speed, but honestly, most of the time you can't have both. But if you're going to go that route, what you have to deliver to them is great communication. I'm doing this on your behalf. You're not involved in this decision-making process, but here's what's going on. Here's the status change. Here's the update, keeping them informed so that they know what you're doing with their money, not just quote unquote spending it blindly.
I love that. And the beautiful thing here is you have data from the PM Trends report to actually answer the question of what's important. Speed to repair matters. Anchor against that and explain the process of how you're going to help them through your decision-making process get the result that they want on efficiency. Okay, so just high level here, we still got quite a bit on the agenda, but we're running out of time. The PM Operations Standards is a framework for managing the operations of your business with measurable data. I guess all data is measurable. With data to be able to deliver these outcomes to your owners. And so if you're not familiar with the PM Operations Standards, we break 8 core processes in property management down into 61 milestones. There's 79 metrics and a bunch of targets based off of what 100 and something property managers believe is top performance in property management. This is a framework to take the conversation that we've had today, and I'm going to give you a little bit more in just a minute as we wrap up as to how you might go about implementing this to actually be able to deliver these kinds of outcomes to your owners and make sure that you are doing it, guarantee that you are doing it from a data-driven, measurable perspective. So that is a high-level overview. Some of you guys have asked, hey, how do I actually track all the metrics in the property management operations standards? We are rolling out a new profit flows dashboard to basically help you monitor the key metrics that owners care about and break down in your processes where the bottlenecks are inside your processes so that you know where the choke points are, that you can solve those, eliminate the constraints, and ultimately deliver the value that the owners are looking for. All right, Brad, over to you.
Yeah, so the PM Trends report and the PMOS, they give you the insight, the owner insight, and the frameworks, the process frameworks you need to be able to do the 2 things you have to do to create that undeniable value. Understand what your clients value, and then demonstrate to your clients that you're actually delivering what they value the most. So we've been calling that data-driven differentiation. Somebody mentioned it earlier, but how do you stay out of the race to the bottom for pricing and instead win the race of value creation and communication in your market so that you become the obvious choice for property owners? So what I want to do is offer you a one-on-one session with me. So I would love the opportunity to meet with you, to have that session, to explore more in detail what this means for you, what it means for your business, and how you can actually leverage the PM Op standards to take your game to the next level. So you can respond in the poll there if that interests you. Would love to book that call with you. And then there's a QR code right there that goes straight to my calendar. Thanks to an awesome broker owner, I'm booked out for a couple weeks with a lot of good calls. But I would love to meet with you in mid to late April and to have that session and to see if there's a way that we can help you put together a game plan to implement the ops standards and measure and deliver that value to your owners and your tenants.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Let's talk a little bit about that and just how do you take this data? How do you position it with your owners? How do you position it in sales conversations? Peter, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the idea of how to show clients that you're delivering value to them, it's actually really difficult to do that. And it also comes across as defensive. You're like, look how much we're doing for you. Don't you get it? Right? It's just like, you're sort of, you're going to run up against a wall there. What I've been doing instead, the way I've been using the PM operations standards and the data from the trends report is I've been using it to help diagnose my company and figure out where are the issues at my property management company that are impacting our customers and then solving for those. So using the PM operations standards, we now know sort of a general framework for how long should it take to turn a property? How long should it take to lease a property? How long should it take to resolve a maintenance issue? How long should it take to onboard a new owner? And that's really helped my company identify the areas that our performance was the worst relative to the benchmark, and then go after solving those problems. The downstream effect of that is happier owners, because their turns are getting done faster, their units are getting listed faster, and things of that nature. So trying to like, now we do have a scorecard. If you go on our website, we have a scorecard where we report some of the metrics like time to turn, days on market, average rent, occupancy, things like that. But trying to like close a sale with that kind of data, or trying to like convince an unhappy owner that they should actually be really happy using like a scorecard, I haven't found that to go well. And so I instead turn inward and I'm like, okay, how can we use this to make our operations better?
So I 100% agree with you, Peter, that if your owner hates you, throwing a chart at them is not going to change that conversation. However, there's a lot of people that are using data in buying conversations. And I have to believe that there is a segment, at least of buyers, that are going to appreciate some kind of data. Maybe it's around positioning. Like if you're leading with here's my 15 slide deck that proves that I'm great. Yes, I can see that not working. But if you're finding out through a series of questions what really matters, and then using data as a way to answer the questions that they're raising as important, don't you think that's a different approach than just chucking data at them? I mean, there's got to be nuance here, but certainly, I mean, a lot of people do find data. Interact with me on that.
Yeah, I actually want to toss this to Jordan because I think he's got great thoughts here.
No, what do people care about is the proxy metrics, the maintenance, work order, repair time. Framing that is so useful. The thing to remember here is that clients have expectations in the absence of you communicating. You could communicate and set expectations or not. If you don't do it, it doesn't prevent people from having expectations. They just have expectations that are misaligned and in favor of what they want, which often means that they're unrealistic. So I am strongly in favor of sharing what you are doing relative to any kind of an objective standard that you can find. And you can find an objective standard for leasing, for maintenance. People are afraid and have concerns and paranoia. I just randomly saw a post from Marcus Sheridan earlier today, and he was the first one that really exposed me to this irrational fear of like, I don't want to talk about pricing. I don't want to talk about these things that could expose me. But the reality is you're not exposing yourself. You're gaining leverage by pushing back against the default expectations that people have that typically are not working in your favor.
Yeah, I think what comes up for me there, Jordan, is just instead of sharing data to prove how great you are, my lived experience has been that sharing data, sharing performance data, sharing metrics, sharing results has been nothing but gold, not only for my property management business, but for my sort of personal brand. Writing in the newsletter and talking on stage, the more transparent I've been with how we're doing and how I'm doing, the better things have gone for me. So maybe that's the right way to think about it here is just share the data, provide the context, and don't try to force a point of view on the prospect or customer. Just let them draw their own conclusions based on what you're sharing. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Just a couple of ideas. One of the things we talk about here at ProfitCoach as we start to wrap this up is, tactically, how do you go about implementing things that we've been talking about to be able to use data effectively? I'm going to just give you an acronym. We call it the Profit Mode, MOED. Measure experience at the process level using industry benchmarks. Optimize your processes with a systematic approach to diagnosing and solving the key bottlenecks. Elevate the team performance. Use the data internally, like Peter was just talking about. Once you know what the client experience is, once you've solved the process bottlenecks, look at the team performance opportunities, elevate performance using the data. And then there is an opportunity, again, I think, to demonstrate, as we've just been talking about, the way that you can meet expectations based off of past performance. And I want to give you some specific ways to do that based off the data in the Property Management Trends Report. Again, speed of communication, repair speed, time to lease, vacancy rates. These are all things that you can use as data points from the trends report. This is a great one. Investors currently working with a property manager report their units stay vacant for 4 weeks versus 4 to 6 weeks for those not working with one. And then if you have the ability to layer on, your company performance, assuming it's favorable, that's a demonstration opportunity. This speed to repair benchmark we've been talking about, communication response times, NPS. We didn't get a chance to discuss this at length. But again, whether or not you use the data internally or externally, huge opportunity. If you look at this, this is the industry, 29 NPS. Where's your company today? And how can you use your performance around Net Promoter Score to your advantage? So just a couple of specific ways that you can collect that data and specific metrics that you can have specific conversations with your owners around in areas that the PM Trends report says are important to them. All right, last question. Going to skip that. Key trends. Guys, hot take. Going to start with you, Jordan. 2025 key trends. This is how we're ending. What do you think property managers should be thinking about most as the thing that's really going to shape the industry in the next couple of years?
Oh boy. Wow. Ending with a banger here. Getting in line with customer expectations is where the money is at. Even if they're not convenient or you don't like them, or you want to dismiss them, just getting really clear on what customer expectations are, leveraging this kind of data, and then finding the opportunities that are presenting themselves related to AI, which is, it's not just changing property management. It's reshaping every service business and every industry right now. So I think a lot of that looks like asking yourself, where are you providing unique human value? So I was on a panel recently and somebody was asking me about, do I think that AI has a role in shaping policy for property managers? And I thought to myself, I sure hope not. That's about what's left. Like, what is the core value that property managers are providing? And if it's not in policy, it's certainly not, it isn't answering questions or performing tasks that can be performed by deterministic logic. Your POV, your perspective that is unique to you on how to run the business, getting really clear on that, doubling down on that, and doubling down on your unique expertise will remain the key issue. Yes, drive efficiency, but everybody else is trying to drive efficiency too. Drive revenue. Everybody else is trying to drive efficiency as well. What makes you unique? Clarify that for your organization. Build conviction around it. And conviction is the word. You know it, you feel it, it's intuitive. And if you don't have it right now, take the time, pause, reflect, find it.
Great words there. Brad, your thoughts?
Can you restate the question? I was looking back in the chat at something. Sorry.
Yeah, that's great. I'll come back to you in a second. Key trends shaping property management. Peter, we talked a little bit about this. Obviously, you threw out AI. That didn't show up in some ways in the PM Trends report. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think if and when we do an update on the PM Trends report, we will get some AI questions in here. I want to hear how owners feel about property managers using AI. That's definitely going to be a big part of our future. Like it, love it, or hate it, AI is taking the business world by storm, including property management. That includes our accounting software. That includes vendors, new vendors, old vendors, all the tools we use every day. And so I think on a pragmatic level, as property management owners and operators and property managers, we need to get conversant with what's happening in the world of AI, and you don't need to be on the cutting edge of it, but just having a sense of what it can or could do and being able to parse out hype from reality. And it is very hard to distinguish those because some of the things that AI can actually literally do sound made up. I did a live stream 2 weeks ago where I built an app in an hour, basically using AI, just typing to it like I would like a sophisticated programmer. It blew my mind. It changed the way I think about the future of this industry and of my working life. So, it would be really, I would be doing a disservice to the audience if I didn't mention AI as my top trend shaping the future of our industry. I'll leave it at that.
Brad, wrap us up.
Sure. I think triangulating the data that we saw today and working in the AI and technology angle to try to understand how can we, where do we need to meet expectations where we're not meeting expectations? How do we need to reset expectations that are not aligned with reality, are not aligned with, like I said, the cognitive dissonance of sometimes seeing one answer and another answer and being like, well, how could I possibly reconcile those things, but also run as efficient of an organization as possible. So, if you pay much attention to ProfitCoach and what we do, we talk a lot about labor efficiency. Labor efficiency is one of the key drivers of property management profitability. Yet at the same time, we have to make sure that we're optimizing labor in a way that doesn't minimize the need to have a very personal touch and communication that really resonates with owners. This is part of why you saw in the data there was, I think it was, what do owners care about? I think it was last on the list was national brands, and that's no shade to the national brands, but it is just revealing that owners aren't looking for something that's like hyper scaled in property management. They're looking for something that's high touch, where they're going to get that communication, and apparently where they're going to get a phone call. So how do we optimize labor efficiency? How do we integrate technology in such a way that it can make us a lot more efficient, but not lose our personal touch and not lose the edge that makes great property management companies great? So I think solving that problem is the big, or it's not a problem. Honestly, it's an opportunity. How do we optimize that opportunity in the next year? I think that conversation is really interesting to me.
Thanks, guys. Peter, Brad, Jordan, not only for being here today, but for doing the hard legwork over the last year. No, make that the last 8 years to give us the data that we can actually have really interesting conversations. One of the things I've discovered is that the greatest way to have a conversation is to have a really good dartboard. And when everybody starts throwing darts, it's a fun time. Thanks, everybody, for doing that with us in chat today. Have a great rest of your day. And up next, Profit Power Hour episode 4 for 2025, April 26th at 12 p.m. CT. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in 4 weeks. Take care, everybody.